Welcome everyone to the city council meeting on Tuesday, January 3rd. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now we're going on to the consideration of the minutes from May 13th. Are there any revisions to the minutes? None?
I move to approve the minutes of May 13.
Any discussion?
I just said second.
All righty. All in favor?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now we're on to the public comment portion of the meeting. Please give your name and mailing address. You have 3 minutes, but I'm not asking for the timer. I assume you'll try and keep it in the 3-minute range. And this is public comment regarding all the resolutions, proclamations, and discussion items on this agenda. So if you have anything to say, now is the time to say it regarding anything on this agenda. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to give public comment?
Well, I did sign up, but it's not necessarily an agenda item, so this is an okay time for me.
Yeah,
Sure.
sure. you
Okay,
bet.
great. Thank you.
Just try and speak up because we're trying to
Okay.
get it to Zoom as well.
So my name's Marcia Zegar and I live up in Haystack Heights. My husband and I had the fortune of moving here to Cannon Beach and being full-time residents since May of 2017. And in case you're not familiar, Haystack Heights is on the east side of 101. We're tucked at the far south end of town. And on behalf of people up in our neighborhood, first thing we wanted to do was thank the city for funding the water line project, which is underway now. Is very much needed and greatly appreciated. Also with our full-time residents in Haystack Heights, ranging from preschools age to senior citizens, we greatly appreciate the city of Cannon Beach also implementing the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit in our neighborhood to help address pedestrian safety issues, because we don't have any sidewalks and there's one way in and one way out of our neighborhood. And we'd also like to thank our Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection District and the Cannon Beach Police Department. Our Haystack Heights neighborhood has much gratitude for their service and also for the assistance various residents have received in time of needs from both of these outstanding departments. So we really greatly appreciate that. Haystack Heights is a wonderful multi-generational residential community introduced to us as being where the locals live. And the fabric of our neighborhood, though, is changing, and there's significant concern regarding the increase of short-term rentals in our neighborhood and the associated impacts. City data dated April 3rd of this year on transient and vacation home rental permits that are granted by the city of Cannon Beach includes the address of each site. And reviewing the addresses, and I was looking at everything on the east side of 101. Vacation town, we know that people are going to want to be by the beach. But I was looking at the data provided for all east side locations. And it appears that more than 85% of the short-term rental permits that have been issued by the city are located in Haystack Heights. And as the popularity of Cannon Beach continues to grow as a tourist site, our east side Haystack Heights neighborhood is very aware of how fragile our existence is as a true neighborhood of full-time Cannon Beach residents. The urgency of addressing the concern is compounded in anticipation of additional homes in our neighborhood that may soon be on the market. And so you should have a packet that was brought to City Hall yesterday. And that packet includes a petition signed by 50 full-time Cannon Beach residents living in Haystack Heights. And we're hopeful for action by the city council to address our concerns. So appreciate your time and appreciate your consideration. And if you have questions, Everyone's email addresses are indicated there, and I've shared my email and phone number too. I'm happy to answer any questions and help come up with some solutions.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Thanks.
thank you.
Anybody else in the audience? Yeah.
I'm Beth Holland at, PO Box 132 in Cannon Beach. I am speaking as a Holland Family Trust member. We would like to thank the mayor, council, and city staff for bringing this resolution forward tonight. We would also like to thank Oregon State Parks, Matt Whitney and Tabitha Hendrickson for their leadership in proposing joining our 4 acres to the 9-acre state park under the city's stewardship. If successful, the deed for our land will closely align with the deed John Yon wrote when leaving his land to state parks. We would like to invite everyone to come up to the hill, explore the trails, and enjoy the views. We are hopeful that once this opportunity is widely known, funds will be raised to settle our trust and to keep the land in the public domain as a nature preserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Kim?
Tim Ramey, PO Box 429 Cannon Beach. Thought I'd start with a slight history lesson. I kind of got involved in Cannon Beach politics a little over 3 years ago. And one of the first things I did was started writing this little thing that many of you see. And one of the first things that I wrote about was the budget process in 2023. Specifically, there was a 15% water rate and 9.5% wastewater rate proposed in that budget. I like to do math. I like math. I like numbers almost more than people. And the numbers didn't add up to me, and I wrote about it and published it and suggested that the right number was probably 2.3% for both. And I sent that analysis to my mailing list, the budget committee, the council. None of you were seated on the council at that time, and I raised the issue also with coffee with the councilors. That turned out to be a win. Numbers kind of don't lie, and they ended up passing a 3% increase in the water rates and a 6% increase in wastewater, and I supported those. I also was sort of campaigning at that time to be on the budget committee. I wasn't on the budget committee. I had twice before been not voted on the budget committee because council wasn't all that fond of me. So this ended up maybe being the credential, and I did get named to the budget committee unanimously at this meeting 3 years ago. And parenthetically, I'm on the docket again today to be renewed. So here we are, 3 years later, and it's the same problem, except it stinks. It really stinks. We've got, we smell that in the room, it's like this 20% number. It's in the agenda. Nobody's gonna utter it tonight because it's been so thoroughly discredited, This number is wrong, okay? You can argue ethics, you can argue whether race should be high or low, who should balance the budget, who should pay the freight. But it's not at issue whether the numbers are right or wrong, they're wrong. And I'm hoping that the council, you're gonna hear from Tim. Tim's a good guy, I have a lot of respect for Tim. He's gonna suggest, I believe, 5 and 10. I think you should kind of throw out 10. Doesn't make any sense. It certainly doesn't make sense to eliminate the backbone from, to just say, well, we're gonna do this because we're gonna eliminate the backbone from the water resiliency plan. It needs to be in there. We just have to figure out a way to do it, and we have to make the numbers not lie. And the numbers that were presented that give you an agenda item that say 20% increases, which is outrageous, are a lot. So I'm hoping council does something quite modest. It's a 2%, 5%, 4%, something that reflects kind of the general rate of inflation. Let's really figure this out. Let's get some decent numbers in front of us, because you don't have that in your packet right now. Probably over my three minutes, but I also care about the issue of the building fund. I brought this up to you also in 2023. It said it was gonna explode, and it did. City paid in $267,000 to the building fund for the purpose of building the city projects. And it just is, it's mindless, and it's probably amoral to spend our taxpayers' money on something that is completely ridiculous, like the building official fund. And you all, I don't have to explain any of this to you. There's an opportunity to fix that, but that opportunity has a short fuse. It runs out at the end of this month. I think Randy Neal will have some comments. He has some interesting novel ideas. None of it's gonna happen tonight, but we have a short fuse to fix this, and I hope you do. Thank you.
Tom Landrum with P.O. Box 865, Cannon Beach. I guess further to what Tim brought up, I'm concerned about the 20% utility rate increase. Our populace is made up of primarily retired people living on Social Security. We may get a 3% vote. And the 20%, that's gonna be hard for people to swallow. And I only recently found out about this 2 days ago. You know, usually people talk about this kind of thing. I don't know why it's not more visible. But anyway, it concerns me. And, you know, I moved from Houston, Texas 7 years ago. I'm paying twice what I paid for water in Houston, Texas. Now, yeah, it's not the same thing. I understand taxes are different. But the way they approached their water system, is that when you got a utility bill for the water, you know, it's covering your water and your waste and the storm drains. It's pretty much the same. The lots are about 4 times the size they are here. So we got a lot to deal with, got a lot more area. But the storm system is a lot more complicated than we have. A lot more sophisticated. So I'm paying twice what I paid there. And now I'm hearing another 20% off. You know, I hope that you do a lot more work. Hope you take a second or third look at this thing and see what you can do. Because, you know, I'm not sure that our populace is going to be very happy with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak? Nobody? Okay, I cannot see that list up there at all, so Rusty, can you tell me, does anyone who wants to speak there, could you give me their names? Okay, let's start with them. You're on, Richard.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
This is Richard Bertolotti, P.O. Box 1382, Cannon Beach. I wrote a memo that to the city council, and I believe you may have received it before the meeting, but I'm going to read the memo. It covers 3 subjects. The first one is the building official fund. The amount in the building official fund is more than what is needed for the building official and is not indicative of sound financial management of city funds. Those funds are restricted by the state law and cannot be spent on any other city business. This was first brought to the city manager, city council, and the finance director in May of 2023. No action has been taken during the last 3 years of budget committee meetings and city council meetings. It is now time to act before the 2024-2025 fiscal year ends on June 30 this year. I am suggesting the city exempt itself from the building permit fees it paid itself for the city hall and police station in 24-25 and adjust building permit fees for 25-26. And I know we've talked about this briefly. I know somebody said that they didn't think it would look good, but I haven't talked to one person in Cannon Beach who thinks it's reasonable that the city charge itself a building permit fee and then put it in a fund that basically can't be spent. So I don't think it's going to raise any issues if you do that action by exempting yourself. Secondly, substantial cash balances. I'm on the budget committee and I know a little bit about numbers. And we talked about this briefly, but I want to make it a public record that the city is sitting on approximately $21.6 million of cash reserves, consisting of 2.3 million of contingencies, 3.5 million in the tourist facility renovation fund, 4.4 million in the general reserve, 1.5 in reserve funds and system development funds that have no home for them, and an ending fund balance of 9.9 million. In addition, we know revenues are always underestimated and expenditures are always overestimated in the budget, creating an additional annual increase in cash balances. In fact, Tim Collier gave us all a pro forma financial statement, and on that it showed that the additional cash balance generated from the 24-25 budget will be $4.4 million. So in addition to the 21.6 that shows up on the budget on page 9, there's an additional 4.4 million coming from this current year where we have excess revenues. The city council needs to pay attention to these numbers and set priorities where the money will be spent. The money could be used in several ways that would benefit the citizens of Cannon Beach, such as funding capital projects, helping with affordable housing, reducing utility rate increase. Currently, there's not a plan in place. And I really believe the city council needs to put more time and effort into this, the excess cash number, and figure out where the priorities are and where it goes. And lastly is the utility rate increase for the 25-26 fee schedule. Building for permit fees should be adjusted to generate less revenue into the building official fund. See my above comment, which is the first thing I talked about tonight, regarding the building official fund. And the city should exempt itself from having to pay for building permit fees for city building projects. And we're going to do something with the school. Eventually, something will happen. There's going to be a big building permit fee if we don't exempt ourselves. Until such time as the building official fund has been reduced to a reasonable balance. This can be reviewed annually during the budget committee meetings. Utility rate increase appears to be out of line with reality based on surplus revenues and ending fund balances. The city should put a hold on utility rate increases until they can explain the necessity of the rate increases. The city owes the citizens of Cannon Beach an easily understood explanation of water, sewer, and stormwater rates. It should simply show the annual revenue, less annual operating expenses and debt service. If there is a deficit, the rate increase would be justified. If there's a surplus, it goes into a reserve account. It is my understanding we are nearing the end of the major water resiliency projects. New capital projects are funded from the reserve accounts or need to be financed from available sources, including surplus city revenue, low interest loans, bonds, or rate increases. Thank you for listening to my comments. Richard Bertolotti.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else online?
Yeah, I have, Randy Neal stands up.
Who? Oh,
Randy
okay.
Neal.
Yes, Randy, go ahead.
I think you're pretty broken, Randy.
Can you hear me?
That's better.
Randy, go ahead.
Randy Neal, P.O. Box 1092. I have three topics. The city has been very successful at creating surpluses over the years. It aggressively sought ways to increase fees, rates, and taxes, and it fought hard to pad expense forecasts, added an extra measure of expenses contingencies. We thought these are less than practices. And, you know, some of the themes that you've heard tonight is how they ripple through other financial systems. One of those needs an urgent fix, which is the building fund. We've talked about how huge it is, and it can't be spent for any other issue. It would take years to draw down, even including the code enforcement suggestion. And code enforcement is our most frequently vacant position. This needs a fix fast before the fiscal year ends. And basically taking money from residents that will not be used for any public good is morally wrong. It's been raised several times and there's no action. I think there's a couple of different creative ways to solve this problem quickly. Richard's mentioned one, I think there's others. The water rate increase, for a while I've asked, how can we be the water rates will triple over the next 5 to 7 years. And it didn't make sense how our expenses could triple. In looking into it, there's several discrepancies. I think we need to take a pause and do nothing on water rates until we really understand what's going on here, what projects we're funding, what is our real expense rates, the real inflation, the real cost of the water project. Do we want to plan?
Breaking up.
Someone recently also asked why funded through rates. Why isn't through property taxes? Which is actually a good question. We funded the wastewater upgrade through property taxes. We actually funded the Ecola Forest Reserve through property taxes. You know, the latter is clearly a risk management type of project, just like resiliency. Doing it property tax wise might be of great benefit to the low income housing complexes like Elk Creek Apartments. You know, it is a very regressive tax through rates, and maybe property tax is a better one. We just need, a few weeks to try to figure out what's the right way. The third topic isn't as critical or urgent, but, like Richard said, we have a lot of strategic issues all tied up in our financials. We have more surpluses than we spend in a year. And if we asked, how much of those surpluses do we really need? The answers basically range from, I don't know, to we should have more. When asked how much of the surplus can be made available for housing or the NACUS CBE Community Center project, the answer is, I don't really know. We know we're underfunded on housing. Some of us believe we could fund an affordable NACUS CBE Community Center project. And we all know that we should be investing something in over tourism. But we really haven't spent the time. What surpluses we have, what surpluses we need, and what are the best, the remaining surpluses on. There's a lot of things on the city agenda, whether it's tree fines or smoke enforcement or putting a cap on chamber funding. I'd much rather see see the council's time spent on these multi-million-dollar surplus opportunities that we're letting slide by. We all learned through the budget cycle that there's a time limit on doing the CBE project. We borrowed the money, and if we don't use it in some time frame, we may have to pay it back. We may have to come up with some other project that could use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Anybody else on Zoom? Rusty? Okay, and anyone in the audience again, who might have walked in? All right. Okay, that concludes the public comment portion of this meeting. The first thing we have on the agenda after that are the resolutions. The first resolution is resolution 2506 for the purpose of the Holland Family Trust, Haystack Hill and Oregon State Parks parcel acquisitions, Oregon Coast Alliance Agreement. And Tim will present the staff.
Excellent. Councilors,
staff report for you, we've talked about, often. The council passed a resolution in July of 24, essentially talking about the, All Family Trust property. One thing on this staff report, you'll notice there's a sentence that says, however, in order for the funds to be collected for the trust, that sentence should actually read, however, in order for Orca to accept funds on behalf of the city, the agreement must be between the city and Orca. So that is one change. In the actual agreement itself, this is, essentially done. There is one minor change. And Orca has asked us to change the insurance from 2 million to 1 million in aggregate, and we are okay with that. We believe that is very low risk, but that is the actual only change to this agreement. And then lastly, in the resolution, one of the whereases, Orca has asked, so we have a whereas, which technically does not actually matter in the adoption of the resolution, but whereas the Holland Family Trust has agreed to take the lead on seeking funding for the purchase, that is struck, and it should be replaced by whereas the city of Cannon Beach will not fundraise or contribute funds for the purchase of the property. So those are the essentially the agreement. Once this is passed, we will sign it with Orca. The appraisal has been ordered, so that will be the next step. We'll get the appraisal, and right now the purchase sale agreement is in negotiation between us and the Holland Family Trust. And I am here with any questions.
City attorney, was
Yes.
drafting this agreement.
Correct. Heather Martin.
Okay.
Mhm. Correct.
Any other discussion by council?
It's probably super minor, just curious. The appraisal has been ordered. Normally that it's owned by whoever ordered it.
Mhm.
Is that because the city ordered it, is that public information?
It will be correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
You actually answered my question, the two questions that I had, you answered in your revisions. Perfect. Thank you for that.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to thank the Holland family for this opportunity. I think it's a great one for the city. And I move to approve resolution 2506 for the purpose of approving the mutual agreement with Oregon Coast Alliance.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Does the motion need to be as amended by the staff report?
No, there it does.
Yes, so I will move to approve the resolution as amended in the staff report.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, can we have roll call, please?
Counselor Hammond,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Ostrander,
Yes.
Council President Burr.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
That's. Okay. The next order of business is resolution 2507. Resolution 2507 to implement the 25-26 City of Cannon Beach Master Fee Schedule. And Kim represent the staff.
What would you guys like to talk about?
We don't want to.
I really am.
Just skip by this.
I really am. Okay, first of all, I would like to tell Tim that I like Tim Raymond too, and I think he's a good guy, so. So before I get into kind of how this works, right, what we're gonna kind of do here. One suggestion I would like to make, or one recommendation I would like to make to the council with regards to the water and wastewater rates. And really, actually, I want to make kind of a 3-step recommendation. So the first recommendation I would like to make is that I would like to make a recommendation where 25-26 water rate goes up by 5%. And after actual discussion with Tim today, looking a little harder at the rate and kind of the way the rate schedule work for wastewater, I would like to make the same recommendation for the wastewater rate. So I'd like to make that recommendation. That'd be the first one. And then, so we would amend the waste or amend the master fee schedule to include those rates currently. The second piece,
So it's on the first page of your, on the summary on the staff report page.
yes,
So it'd be base rate 5%,
5%,
volume rate
5%.
Base
Base wastewater,
wastewater,
right, 5%.
5% for volume, and then 2.25.
For the stormwater, correct. That's what it would be for 25-26. The second part of my suggestion, recommendation would be, to Mr. Neal's, Mr. Rainey's, Mr. Bertolotti's, actually overall. I believe that over the next 2 months, we actually focus on developing a, reserve policy across all funds. And the reason I recommend that is, one, not only in the utility funds, but actually across all funds. And the reason I recommend that is right now, it appears that what we're having is difficulty in focusing where we're being able to focus those focus funds. And where we're being able to focus spending. So for instance, one of the things that you could do with regards to, in the water waste or in the water fund, one of the things that is a recommendation from the utility rate study is 73 days of operating and maintenance expenditures. Well, what you could do in theory is you could offload that risk to a general fund reserve, right? So what that would do is that would protect the actual rate, right? So you aren't actually taking cash, but you're self-insuring against that rate. You could do that with regards to a reserve. But without knowing how or what or why you want to spend those reserves, I think it's very difficult to make those decisions. Then the third recommendation I would make is that team, go deeply into the rates. And again, going back to Mr. Neal's point, Mr. Rainey's point, is that I think, really need to go into the detail on the expenditures in the future capital plan with regards to the utilities. And then we present a 26-27 plan in December/January to show the rate structure for beginning 26-27. So those are my recommendations with regards to the wastewater rates. I believe to a point with Mr. Neal, we don't always agree on everything, but to a point, I think we were a little conservative on reserves, on what those balances were, on how we were funding long-term with regards to our rates. And I think that could potentially impact the rate. We could be over collecting in theory, but until we actually delve in more detail, I have a real hard time making that announcement now. So that's what I would like to present to the council. I would like to make that recommendation. Of course, you as being council, I only make the recommendation. You as council will make the decision.
I have a question.
Fire.
When we've talked about the rates, was it last spring or something? We talked about decoupling the base rate from the volume rate. And as a result of that discussion, we didn't even raise the base rate by the cost of living. I don't believe last year at all. Is that where you're getting that 5%? Are you getting it from cost of living this year plus cost of living last year when we failed to raise the base rate by a cost of living?
Well, where I'm getting the 5% right now is really, when I look at what we have spent basically in the current year, where I'm getting that right now is we are eating into the fund balance in the current year, which means where I'm projecting is that I have overspent the revenue that I'm collecting. Now, that may be fine because of the amount of the reserve that I have, but I think we need to delve deeper into the capital program, the backbone, all of that stuff, and actually come up with the right answer.
But your, proposal here does not decouple volume from base rate at all. It's the same for both. I thought that part of our discussion was we wanted to decouple them because it actually, well, it'll have less effect that way on residents with 3/4 inch pipes who are not using over the base rate of water, which is a lot of people. And, because it encourages water conservation. So why is that not reflected in your?
Well, Councilor Kerr, like again, for me to be a water expert, I'm not quite a water expert. I'd be the first to admit that right now. I think one of the issues that we have, and to a point that Mr. Neal has made probably for the last 3 years, when we made a change from the way the rate where we moved everybody to the base is now 400 cubic feet away from that old rate. I'm not sure that we have actually really seen or figured out what that total impact is. We do know that it had a really negative impact on Elk Creek.
Well,
Right,
that's because Elk Creek had the wrong size pipe.
right, but it didn't, but prior to that, it did be, until we made that change, it was not an actual impact. Right, it was not a monetary impact prior to that,
Okay, but
so,
I guess I'm not, okay, I mean, it's for the entire council to decide, obviously, but I just. It seems to me that decoupling those two rates makes a lot of sense. And also, we have never really addressed the effect of. The volume rate on multifamily dwellings. Now, I know there's not that many that use a larger pipe in the city, not residential
Right.
dwellings, so.
and again, I would really, that's part of, I guess, the third step in my proposal. Is I really want to dig deeper into that when we're looking at the 26, 27. I really want to be able to have a more detailed plan and explanation as we go.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, we had said we were going to do it, but we never really got
I
to
know,
do it.
and that's really what I'm shooting, so.
So the 20% that was initially in the packet that was the rate study that was.
That was based on the rate study from the prior.
And the rate study, as far as I can tell, it had not taken into account the impact that reducing everyone to the 400 cubic feet. It hadn't taken into account that change.
It seemed to me more so that it didn't take into account the amount of ending it had a lower starting reserves amount. Is what
And
it's
a lower
seemed to
ending fund
me.
contribution.
Yeah, so that's what it seemed to me. So it seemed that it may have overstated expenditures initially, right? So then that kind of compounds. And then, so it understated the initial reserve amount. So I think.
And then it just escalated.
Yeah,
year on
and I've become more familiar with this model over the last 3 weeks, probably more than I originally wanted to be. But I think it seems to me that it can be made simpler and that it can be easier to explain. So, I guess that's the vote.
So one of the comments that Randy had in the public comment was about having a clear and concise report of these are the expenses, this is the revenue. Is that something you're hoping to?
That is
foundation, what you're proposing?
And this is a little bit too, where we talked at the budget committee meeting, and if you remember where I talked about. So we have a water fund and we have a water reserve fund. We have a wastewater fund, we have a wastewater reserve fund. We have a storm fund, we have a storm drain reserve fund. And those should only be 3 funds instead of 6 funds, right? So all the expenditures with regards to those types of activities should really only be in those individual funds. And I think once you see that, then it's also easier for people to track, because when you're looking at water expenditures, you're looking at both water and you have to look at the wastewater fund, and you have to remove transfers, and I think it's just more easier to look at those, so.
So the rate study was not meant to be understood, I don't think.
I think,
A simplistic way of putting it. But I do have, I do understand what you're saying. Appreciate what you're saying. We're talking about cost of living increase and the 5% that you came up with. I, kind of feel like in 2020, in 2024, cost of living is 3.2%. 2025, it's about 2.5%. Can you sharpen your pencil and give us 3.5% increase instead of 5%? We've got money, so we're not.
if council would like to do 3.5%, I am a conservative accountant that always is concerned that something is gonna go wrong. So that's always my worry.
I can appreciate that.
It's always my worry. I am always worried about that.
And it isn't that, doesn't the 5% more accurately reflect the fact that we didn't do a cost of living increase for the base rate on a 3/4 inch pipe last year?
We did it in January, we didn't, so we had like, it's been 18 months with regards to that, so. The problem with like the concern with me for like wastewater is we've added an FTE and we're running both bases. So that concerns me a little bit with wastewater on top of the cost of living, so those are things that concern me a little bit.
Is there any possibility of even considering putting, taking the 5% and 5%, straight across the board for volume and for base rate, maybe increasing the base rate 3% and increasing the volume 7% to get the same, in other words, decoupling, again, I'm back on the decoupling thing, of decoupling the base rate from the volume rate. Because I believe that is, encourages water conservation.
But didn't we do that?
We did, but this does not reflect it.
But what, because they're both going up 5%, it doesn't continue to push them farther apart.
No, it doesn't, but it would seem that if you really want to decouple, then you would raise your base rate less than you would your volume rate. In other words, let the volume take the burden of it rather than the base rate, because
Seems like it did.
it did
Well,
in the beginning, but it isn't, this doesn't reflect that. When you have the same amount of percentage of rate increase for both base and volume. I guess I'm just saying that because the base rate is the one that really affects the person living on Social Security is going to think about how much water they use, because they're not gonna wanna go over that 400 cubic feet, because it gets very expensive after that, Whereas if you don't care about it, or if you have a garden that's more important to you than your wallet, then you will, go over that base rate and into the volume.
Well, we're still dealing with the unintended consequences at the apartment complex. If you try to push the volume rate right now without a policy, without dealing with the issue that came up previously, then it's gonna put them, the low income housing, it's gonna put that even further in the grid.
But I thought we had already, well, okay, you're saying because the low income housing is gonna go into the volume.
Oh, they're always with the methodology that changed in 2020,
So-
they're always gonna be.
So then we can't do that without addressing the effect on multifamily.
It's a.
And I'm
it's a
not gonna be able
multifamily.
to address the effect on multiple family housing.
We were gonna do that 3 years ago. That was actually in the minutes from a meeting that not that this council had actually, or even the previous council, but the council before that had a discussion where they said they were going to address that issue. And then so many other things happened. It was unintentional, but it fell by the wayside unintentionally. And now Elk Creek paid the price for it, and we still haven't done it. We still haven't decided how that's gonna work. Cause it has to work in a way that makes sense.
And there is this multifamily housing penalty that needs to be addressed. Obviously, Oak Creek made it abundantly clear.
Yeah,
But as we're trying to incentivize duplexes, same thing, if you're sharing a 3/4 pipe and a duplex.
Pretty easily go right over.
Yeah, if both parties use, just under the 400 cubic feet base level, you're paying a much higher rate,
Yeah, kind of higher volume rate.
much higher volume rate.
Yeah, but I guess I didn't, I was hoping we would do that sooner rather than later. That figuring how that works, because now we're 3 years later.
I've only been here 12 months.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying, something probably feels like 10 years.
At this point, the 5% recommendation feels like a big win. Maybe we can.
Again, I think, so, so again, it was 5-5 for everything, and then come back. I think the big thing is gonna be, and this will be hard, I think, is come up with reserve policies. I think it's gonna be tough. And then the water rates for essentially design a little bit for 26, 27. And then target that for December/January.
Well, we haven't spent the money for the capital improvements for 2025 yet.
For 2025.
Yeah, FY 2025. I mean, we have ending fund balance that we didn't spend because the capital improvements haven't happened yet. All of them.
All of them,
payment-
right.
the
But
payment for it
I
is
just
not
dropped $180,000 today for Haystack Heights, so. And we've got the reserve or the reservoir, will be done by May. So yes, there's just a lot, and so, again, I think Randy's got a great point, and I think we need to really get into the meat and potatoes and do that, so. But again, these are only recommendations to council, and I only recommend council makes the call.
That flawed 10-year study that we felt like we had to do something with, and, it took a couple of meetings and felt like we were making the best moves we could at that point.
Given the information, yeah.
But so the 10-year study, and that rate plan, what did it cover as far as the capital improvements?
So it had, so as far as the capital improvements, like it had, a certain replacement schedule, so like 110,000 a year on, basic replacement. So every year for a decade, 20 years. It had Haystack Heights, it had, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, it added the backbone project. There were a couple other larger ones,
And it was through the entire.
It was
the
through the-
resiliency project.
It was through the resiliency project. The timing, of course, when they put it in, I think they started in 22, when the actual timing of the projects happened was, different. So, and then, of course, when, what the expenditures were, for O&M, that sort of thing. They didn't have the debt schedules, those were different. So.
I just have a question, this is just for me, and you can answer it maybe. So for a duplex with a 3/4 inch pipe, Do you have separate meters or is it, okay,
So
so,
separate meters is not an issue, but
but you have one, so you're paying volume rate then,
yes,
okay.
I don't know if that's atypical duplexes or not.
What's that?
Whether duplexes typically have separate 3/4 meters or
Thank you.
they typically do.
Yeah, because the duplex can be sold separately, they require them to be metered separately when they're built. So some of the older ones may not, but all of the new ones built are metered separately.
So they're ADUs.
The exception would be Breakers Point, where there are 5 or 6 buildings on 1 meter, and so there you actually get a great rate.
Eric's got a good question as far as ADUs as well.
Yeah, are ADUs typically 1 meter?
So back when I was in public works, it was just 1 meter. I don't know if anything's changed since then, but I typically know, you're all
They're not.
because you can't sell it.
And so anyone that has a full-time rental in their ADU, or if they're using both units,
So you're paying volume
would be
rate.
paying in the volume rate.
Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion?
Does anybody have thoughts on the rest of the fees or all?
Oh,
I mean,
so on so the rest of the fees, really, the business license fees, there's no change currently. There's also, we still have the, business fees. I know everybody's excited about that, but there's no change in that, but I think, we've talked a little bit about looking at those and potentially reducing that fee base. But we can change the master fee schedule at any time we want.
Right, I mean, that's the idea behind
Right,
doing
exactly.
this.
And then
But we'd never done the water rates, which it feels like we're here again at the last moment
Mhm.
dealing with water rates.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like, and I'm gonna agree with Gary, I kind of felt like intentional or not, that this was a little bait and switch. We got the master fee schedule that we all agreed on. I mean, we agreed that was a great idea, and now we have water rates in here.
Mhm.
We're having a conversation that we're maybe not as prepared as we could be for.
That, Councilor Hammond, that was totally my fault. That was not the intention, and that was totally my fault. I don't-
didn't think.
I was not the intention, no, absolutely not, that's not the intention.
And should we, we need to, I mean, we should kind of try and decide or figure out when we can get on the schedule to talk about the, building permit.
Yes.
And, and how we're going to move forward with that. I think that's important to get some of that money out of that, about 1% of that fund.
Yeah, and obviously everything else was, addressing the other fees, which I agree, we should be looking at that. Looking at a reserve policy is something that we can do once we have this in place. And obviously a 26-27 plan in advance that we can really see where we landed. But for tonight, I think if we can get this fee schedule approved and,
And just one little note, so the 2504 SDC fees, you adopted them in April, they were wrong. They should have been, so the from is what was adopted, which was incorrect, and they should have been what is in the two.
It should have been what?
What is in on the staff report, what is in the two, that's what they actually should have been, so they were incorrect, these were incorrect. So they were adopted incorrectly, these are the correct SDC fees. We have changed the process internally in what we would do, next year, and so that should not happen again.
So should we pass this master fee schedule without the utility rate increases? Amendment to take those off until we're more prepared to have a conversation about that.
You wanna do 0 increase?
I don't feel comfortable with that. A zero increase, I really don't. I don't wanna see us, you know why? Because that's what happened year after year after year. with the council previous to mine. They never wanted to do it, they never wanted to address it. They didn't make any increases, and then we got stuck with the mess. And I don't wanna see that happen again, so I don't wanna just put it off. I think we need to come up with some modest increase right now, but certainly not 20%.
So this last year, the COLA that was approved for city staff was at 3.5? Is that
Was it?
2.5?
For which,
For the COLA, the inflation increase for staff, the
375,
3.75?
375.
Okay,
I mean, if you're thinking,
so I feel like we need to go at least that much
Right.
to cover the expenses of staffing and anticipated staffing or anticipated expenses for the replacement of new pipe and stuff like that,
so
just whatever the inflationary
3.7 and then another
change was at.
1.3 just to have it
Well,
possible.
the 3.75 would cover, I would think that would, because that's for the overall budget and staffing only covers 1/3 of, well, less than 1/3 of our total expenses in there.
Yeah,
So you're trying to get lower than the 5?
That's where I was, I'm just, I look at this as affordability in Cannon Beach and being able to like, it's. I think, somebody said it's regressive form, so it's only people that can't afford it are essentially the ones that are impacted most heavily by water rate increases, so it's
which is,
trying to keep that as small as possible.
which is why I
To
was
still
trying
cover.
to, that's
Yeah.
why I was trying to decouple the base rate from the, exactly to address that issue,
Well,
you know, but.
I also don't wanna see us in a position that we,
Have to do a 10.
are so low that then, in a couple of years, we have to jump up
Right,
to 10
which is what
to,
happened to us
Mhm.
yes.
as a council, because previous councils took no action. And just,
Well, that doesn't mean that we can't take more action on it, that's what I was saying, is that we move forward, because the reason that I came up with 3.5% was actually because I should have said 2.5%. Not thinking of the city has money to pay their people. And. But I'm thinking about the constituents, excuse me. The constituents only getting, the bulk of the people in our community only getting a 2.5% cost of living. In. There. So.
right, I guess that's why I'm so curious about the reticence to decouple base rate from, except for when it comes to multifamily loans or older duplexes. But, that is decoupling is for that purpose. For the people who are living on a fixed income are not going to go over the 400 base rate, but anyway. I'm happy, actually. I think the 5% makes sense to me, just because. And then if next year, we don't have to go that high rate, but right now, we don't have the information.
We
And-
don't have the
And
information.
we're reducing it by the 15%, I mean, 75% of what was originally, suggested was a 20% increase. We're going down to 5.
Yeah, my question is, how flawed was that 10-year study?
Yeah,
Because
I don't
we
know.
are, I don't know. Do we wanna hear from Tim?
My thought is we don't have the information that we need to make a decision today.
Well, when does this have to be, when would this have to be? What's the
As I once told a school district on September 15th, when they had to cut $1 million. The longer you wait to cut, because school's already started, the worse the cut has to get. So the longer you wait beyond July 1 to raise rates, the worse eventually the rate has to. become.
Yeah, I'd like to keep the fiscal
So-
year clean myself.
That is it. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with 5%, I think, and again, just recommendation. I think Eric has, logic with the 3.75 is cost of living and what we have with regards to the, salary increases. That's not a horrible, if you don't feel comfortable at 3.75.
Well, you don't see that causing problems.
I know, I think at the end of the day, it will cause a problem. I think it will, I think it will at some point in time. What the level of the problem is gonna be, I cannot tell you at this point in time. Again, I'm an accountant, I'm more conservative than most with regards to these. Right, I am always worried that there's going to be an issue. I'm just gonna be worried. If we have an issue, we have a catastrophe, something happens, I'm gonna be concerned. Right, and that will we be able to make it from something else? Yes, we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the 10-year plan has 3 years in a row, I believe, at 20%.
Right.
Increases.
Do I want, but do I want to eat current ending fund, or do I want to pay for ongoing expenditures with ending fund balance? No, because you don't want to spend one-time money on ongoing expenditures. You just don't want to do that. It's not good practice, so. But
So that's why you picked 5%, because you thought that would waylay any major problems.
I thought that would waylay any major problem. I thought that would buy us time, and again, from what my plan was again to figure out smaller increase now, make sure that we're essentially covered, figure out the reserve policy, come up with a better plan for 26, 27 that we can do a much better, more detailed, where it's easier for people to understand. That's my plan.
When I have a financial advisor, I usually listen to their recommendations.
Could someone give me do the quick math on what a 5% increase on the base rate would be for a 3/4 inch pipe for next year? How much, what kind of a jump that is?
$1.55 a month.
55 a month?
$1.55.
$1.55
For one, no,
for a 3/4 inch pipe
right,
to go.
for one person, for
3/4.
one house,
Yes, for one house.
$1.55.
Sorry, I was answering it.
Oh,
$1.55.
$1.55.
Increase.
Yes.
With a 5%.
yes, roughly,
On the base rate.
$1.55.
Well, I think that seems reasonable, $1.55. I don't. $1.55 a month. That's $18 a year, something less.
How much is the 5% increase forever?
For what?
Forever.
For everything, on the water rate, it would be. Where's that? 1.8 million, water would be 90 grand, right? And then.
You're talking about, I think you're talking.
You're
about
talking
just
utility
for-
bill?
A single user.
Single user.
Single user.
3/4. Yeah.
That's base rate.
So, hold on for a second here. I have 5%, 60. So what is that? 50, a little over $50, right? No.
It's $1.50.
Well, there's no
per-
volume.
Just water,
No
so it's
additional
18
volume.
plus. Another, 50. 30. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to figure out what people's increase will be with a 3/4 inch pipe with a 5% increase across the board for wastewater, stormwater, and water. I think that's what you're suggesting.
Well, I think he's still talking about the 2.75 or whatever for the storm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so that stays the same.
So with a 5% increase for water and the other percentages you suggested, I'm just trying to figure out for a user per month,
Using under the base rate,
under the base rate,
so there's
what
no
would be
volume,
the total?
no volume increase, even though
Right.
we are increasing it.
Right. So what would be most difficult?
Let me just.
It's water rate.
It's water rate. 100%.
I've got the current rates pulled up if you want.
Yeah, what's the current rate?
31.57
57, so
for
that,
water,
so that's $1.58 a month, okay?
36.90 for waste. And the storm is 13.3.
Maybe 275.
You said 13, I'm sorry, Eric, 1343?
Yes.
Storm is 2, 3%.
So.
Figure whatever we're doing here is hopefully decreasing any increases we have to make in the future.
45 bucks, 45.18 a year,
45.18 a year.
45.18 for a 300 user, 400 cubic feet.
Okay. So $45 increase per year. Which is essentially almost, well, but that seems,
And
that's a whole lot better than what.
And the 5% you're proposing that 5% because you don't foresee that putting us in a bind to be able to actually afford to pay our staff and accomplish the tasks that are set out. for
Correct.
us fiscal year.
I don't see us eating into anything fund balance. And then, again. And we may end up saying reserves are way more sufficient than we needed, and then we could recommend that we're at a lower rate on going forward. But I don't know that at that point in time, but I know we'll be sufficient then. So that's my recommendation.
It's 20% increases for the next couple of years, this is gonna come up again. Yeah.
What's that?
Rate study, multiple 20% increases.
I would not, so what I would not foresee going back through that model. And given current facts. I would not foresee that of rate increases. Unless you, as a council, were trying to self-fund without debt, like something like the backbone or some other thing like that. So if you were just trying to pay for backbone straight out of cash. Which I wouldn't recommend.
Well, let me give this a shot, unless you guys wanna keep talking about it. I move to approve resolution number 2507. For the purpose of repealing resolutions 2301, 2504, and 2410. And establishing the 2526 City of Cannon Beach Master Fee Schedule. Amending the fee schedule for base water rate, volume water rate. Base wastewater rate and volume wastewater rate at 5% increase.
That's just what you would suggest.
That's what I recommend, basically.
I'm the second of that. Any further discussion? Want to call a roll?
Okay, and Counselor Hayden,
Yes.
Counselor Ostrander,
Yes.
Counselor Hammond,
No,
Counselor Kirk, Council President Kirk.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Kim. Thank you for responding to everybody. And really, that was terrific that you did that you were so responsive to all the concerns.
As long as we can want life and it's Tuesday.
I bet. No, it was pretty freaky when we said your second thing. It's like, sorry. Yeah.
you're number 2, developing a reserve policy, that's for all reserves.
It's for all reserves,
Yeah,
yes, no, so that is because I believe
they all are interlocked together because you can make decisions about what you'll do with the general reserve that can impact other reserves, right? Or how you will impact those reserves. So that's where I would say.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And this is the disadvantage of having me chair the meeting. We're gonna take a 1 minute break. 1 minute. Let's up, we need more than time. Okay, proclamation 2509, Tufted Puffin Month, and Kelly will present the staff report.
Yes, thank you. Well, we're talking about water. We're gonna talk about one of my favorite animals that you can find out on the Pacific Ocean near us. So a little bit of background on this proclamation and why we recognize, or why we ask council to recognize June as Tufted Puffin Month in Cannon Beach is because the population of tufted puffins in the 1980s coastwide in Oregon was estimated to be about 5,000 individuals nesting off on our coast, on our nearshore islands and our rocky shores. And that number today is estimated to be about 500 individuals. At Haystack Rock, specifically in the 80s, our census showed we had approximately 600 nesting individuals. Today, we consistently see that there are about 100 individuals plus minus 20. So because of that, we recognize that this is a species that is in peril and is facing declines in its population on the coast of California, Oregon, and Washington. And in 2020, a petition to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services to put these species on the Endangered Species Act was denied. And in response to that, our local nonprofit, volunteer nonprofit known as the Friends of Haystack Rock, decided to take it upon themselves to run a campaign to gather funds in order to get a management plan in place by working with National Audubon, similar to a management plan that exists on the East Coast for the Atlantic puffin that has shown a lot of success. And this nonprofit worked really hard to bring a lot of awareness and attention to the plight of this really iconic species that is one of the major icons here at Haystack Rock and in Cannon Beach. And they successfully raised the funds in a really short amount of time to do that. And now today, 4 years later, after they began that campaign and 5 years after the denial of the Endangered Species Act, we now have a management plan being put in place with a coordinator that works from National Audubon. And so we want to continue that trend of bringing awareness and attention into this species and the struggles that they continue to face and the hard work that is being done in our community by many of our volunteers and nonprofits. And if you have any questions about tufted puffins, I'd be happy to answer them, but I suggest that you adopt this proclamation.
And any council, any questions or ideas, or would anyone like to make a motion?
No, I'd like to move to adopt proclamation 2509 for the purpose of proclaiming June 2025 as Tufted Puffin Month in the city of Cannon Beach.
Second. Roll call?
Councilor Ostrander,
Yes.
Councilor Hammond,
Yes.
Councilor Hayes,
Yes.
Council President Kirk.
Yes. And then Kelly, I guess it's up to you to read the proclamation.
Sure.
You want a hard copy? They can probably let us see.
That might be a little easier. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Before the city of Cannon Beach, for the purpose of claiming June 2025 as Tufted Puffin Month, proclamation number 2509. Whereas tufted puffins are an iconic species that can be seen from April through August on Haystack Rock, where they breed and raise young puplings before heading back out to sea for the winter. And whereas the tufted puffin population faces numerous threats and challenges, including pollution in our ocean waters, invasive species that impact their breeding habitats and nests, bycatch, climate change causing ocean temperatures to rise, and forage fish moving further north to cooler waters, and a lack of food due to overfishing. And whereas more research is required to uncover mysteries in the tufted puffin life cycle, such as what they do out at sea during the winter, And whereas organizations such as Friends of Haystack Rock, as well as Haystack Rock Awareness Program, and a number of public and private partners work to support research, educate the public, and advocate for protection of the dolphin and other Cannon Beach species. And whereas Friends of Haystack Rock has events planned through spring and summer, working in partnership with Haystack Rock Awareness Program to promote education, awareness, and conservation of tufted puffins, including welcome back puffins and puffin watches. And whereas thousands of people observe tufted puffins each year while visiting our beautiful beaches that are a shared resource between wildlife and people, and therefore be it resolved that the city of Cannon Beach proclaims June 2025 as Tufted Puffin Month, honoring tufted puffins and those that seek to protect them. Further, that we stand united in our commitment to protect and conserve this iconic species so that current and future residents and visitors can enjoy in their breeding range in Cannon Beach for many years to come, and encourage others to learn more about this incredible species and do what is possible to protect them and their habitat.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, the next thing on our agenda, is appointment of city committee, board, commission. Tim Ramey's up for budget committee renewal. Tim, would you like to say anything?
I would. First of all, thank you, council, for the opportunity to serve these past 3 years. As you may have heard, I do have a passion for numbers and for getting things right. And I think as a city, we're blessed in so many ways. One of the ways we're blessed is Tim Collier is a real finance director. He's a real chief financial officer. His idea of redoing these reserve funds is brilliant, will create clarity, will help us prioritize, help us spend money. And so we are so much on the right track on so many things. I was happy with budget process this year. I think we moved in the right direction. And I appreciate the confidence and the opportunity to serve. And I most of all appreciate arguing with Tim Collier because he's a smart guy.
Any questions by council members?
No, I move to renew Tim Ramey for budget committee for a second 3-year term.
Second?
Roll call?
Councilor Hammond,
Yes.
Councilor Hayes,
Yes.
Councilor Ostrander. Council President Kirk.
Yes. Welcome back. Okay. The next thing on the agenda is the letter opposing new offshore oil and gas leases off the Oregon coast. Jen, I think did a wonderful job on doing this, so thank you, Jen. I've asked if she will present the staff report.
So as you guys remember, at last month's meeting during the order, we discussed being contacted by in person Jeremy Lucas about doing a resolution against the offshore oil and gas leasing. After council talked about it briefly, we talked about doing a letter instead of a resolution. We took his resolution and changed it to letter form. And so that is what is in our packet tonight for your consideration. If you would like to make any changes, we can make changes as you would like. Once it's finalized, we will upload it into their system for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management.
Rome, I think they call themselves. Go on. Any discussion?
I was wondering about the letter for it. I'm assuming that we're in general united against this activity taking place, and so this letter is going in the right direction. Is that? Okay, so my comment on it is then, in the end, it's signed, Barb Robson, Cannon Beach Mayor. Should it say
Yeah,
something along
and
at city council
I
and,
would like that.
and something more extensive, so it's not just the mayor speaking on behalf of the mayor, but
I was curious about that, Jen. Is there a reason why it's just signed by the mayor? Can it be signed by the mayor and the city council?
Because most of the ones we do are signed by the mayor, so I just did it that way, but I can definitely change it to say,
Because he did
city
ask-
council, the mayor, not.
He did ask me to, you know, he really had wanted a resolution, but he's happy to give a letter as well, so. And I'd like to see it signed by.
Unanimous agreement of,
Yeah, that's even better, unanimous agreement of the.
If that's.
I want to see offshore drill, no, yes, I absolutely. Sorry.
Not you.
Don't come after me, yes, I am in complete agreement with that.
Then I can make that change really quick and then upload it tomorrow.
We have a motion,
I move to approve the letter opposing new offshore oil and gas leasing off the Oregon coast
Second,
as amended.
second,
okay, and roll call please.
Counselor Hayes,
yes,
Counselor Ostrander,
yes.
Counselor Hammond,
Yes.
Council President Kirk.
Yes,
And like in that vein, anybody can go on to the OregonShores.org and get instructions on how to read the information from the vote on the BOEM website. And what the requests for how a public comment to BOEM works, because it's a little bit more complicated than just sending in a letter. There's a few steps for references, but the OregonShores.org has that information on how to learn about it and how to make a comment on it as
and
well.
there was that attachment that was sent, but it's, you know, it's not easy reading, but.
It's extensive.
Okay, so next we have the monthly status report. And are there any questions on the monthly status report from anybody? Council? No? Okay. Mayor Knopf did not have anything to share as far as communications. Are there any councilor communications? No. At least the ones we all got, we saw those. And then for the good of the order, is there anything for the good of the order?
I have a question. We received an email, there's a business, I think Jen may have sent an email, down South Hemlock, the old, the pot shop that's been doing barbecue and taking up their parking
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff. Do we have an update? We got an email saying that Ashley was looking into
Yes.
something with that.
So we did meet with Ashley and, I think one of the biggest things with this is the business has new owners. So anything that happened last year can't be counted towards this current situation. So they were verbally, Daniel came up and talked with them. They did violate the permit by having a barbecue on an extra day. Because they were only permitted to do it for the Saturday and Sunday, not on the Monday. Their permit showed that the barbecue would take place on the north end of the lot, and they actually put it on the south end where they weren't supposed to. And then I believe a couple days later, we were informed that they had a sign issue. And so Daniel went and looked at that as well. So he gave them several verbal warnings and followed up with a written letter saying, hey, I've been out here multiple times. These are the things that we discussed. These are the codes that you need to respond to, and any future complaints, you will be basically cited. So they, is that covering it pretty good? Okay. So that was pretty much the end of warnings for them. We gave them a chance, and so now any future complaints, they will be cited.
Okay.
And I think one of the things too that, was mentioned, when we talked with Ashley is she's looking at some additional conditions of approval for any future event permits. So if they do apply for another permit for a barbecue, what are some of these additional conditions that we can put on that permit? And so we're just waiting to hear back from her on what we can, put on that, but we'll definitely be following them very closely and making sure that they're, following Daniel's direction. And I think the big thing is there's a little bit of a disconnect between the business owner and the gentleman who's running it. And so we need to make sure that line of communication is being, open between those two to make sure that she understands what's going on at her business, and that the, person that's running it needs to be following the same rules that she's being, directed to.
And
Okay.
I have a question, Jeff, for you, I guess, it's come to my attention that there have been some personnel changes, like I don't know how I missed it, but Bill Tobiasman evidently retired.
Yes,
And today was the first day I heard about it. I hear through the pipeline that other people might be retiring. I've also been told that it's none of the council's business who's retiring and who isn't, and who's taking their place. And I've also heard from other people that they'd like to know as counselors. So I'm curious, what is the policy? If personnel or staff are leaving or planning to retire or going to need to be replaced, when does the council find out about this, or is it none of our business?
I think when people plan to retire ahead of time and give notice, the council would typically be notified. As far as staff changes, no official letter has been given for staff changes for retiring. With the Bill Kavizman, I didn't realize that either until just recently, so I think it's one of those things that everything's just been a little hectic. And we're still getting settled in and getting back into our routine of things, so we'll make sure we do a better job in the future, of just giving you an FYI.
And I'm not clear exactly who's taking Bill's place.
So there's another attorney there named Melissa Ryan, and so she has been helping out the last few months. I had heard her name before, but didn't realize that she was taking over for Bill. We still do have access to Carrie Richter. She's helped out with a lot of the Robert stuff, so she's still involved in it. And I don't actually know when Bill's last day is, I just know the day of transition to missing.
And so our attorney representing us at Luba and the Court of Appeals, and actually for the Roberts at the Oregon Supreme Court, will no longer be Bill.
I believe that is correct, but my understanding is though it is Carrie who is very familiar with the case and has been a part of it, and I can double check with, Steve and Bruce to make sure that that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just so sad to hear that, because he's done a pretty great job for us in court, and
Yeah, and he's been here for as long as I've been, and he's been here since before I started, so
he
like,
knows the city backwards and
Yeah.
forwards, and knows all the land use issues, and I'm just really sad to hear that. He's done such a great job, and I wish we could have a chance to thank him for something. Anyway, and then, I'd like to see STRs put back on the agenda myself. We had a person, speaking tonight on the issue with a petition. And I think that it's something we need to address. We've talked about putting a cap on STRs. We've never actually done it. People have thrown different numbers out. We've never made a decision. I think.
Did we have that on the schedule?
so I think the last time we talked about it, it was discussed to put it back into the code audit, and so it was gonna happen as part of the code audit. So that's why it's not on any future agenda,
Oh, okay.
so,
Yeah, I think the rationale for that was because of where it's located in our code, it's located in land use. So any modification requires the measure 56 notice
Right.
and
But
so,
if we're gonna do the changes or even discuss the changes that are being proposed for the, code audit next, I think it's gonna be in July now, is when the new date is. Then I think that none of those changes will work unless we have an STR policy. So I think it's gotta go hand in hand then, not just happen later.
whatever council would like us to do, we can do. So if you'd like to have discussions in a work session about the changes you'd like to make, we can do that. I know that it is planned to go through with the code audit. I don't have it coming back on the code audit schedule or process of their.
So maybe Marcy at the next meeting, which is in July with her, I believe, the planning commission meeting, she would probably maybe could talk about how that's part of the package.
Okay, I will email Lisa, that's right, typing Lisa, I will email Marcy and ask her.
Yeah,
If that's-
and then that goes in front of the planning commission, they make the decision, this, the first decision.
Lisa, I may have misunderstood that, but if you change the location of the STR regs with the code audit process, then it becomes easier down the road to change those STR regs. Did I understand that correctly?
that's, we had a discussion, a few
Yeah,
months
so,
back.
so that, I think that's why the sequencing was meant to be that
But
way.
we wanted to, well, we'll see when you see the packet for that meeting, that it all has to kind of work together in order for the
And,
changes to make any sense.
well, and then part of our comprehensive plan calls out specifically,
Right,
so we have to do a comprehensive plan
right.
amendment in order to actually get away from measure 56 notices.
So we just
For
need to
STS
discuss,
tables.
we need to
Yeah.
discuss it, yeah. Oh, look, here comes our mayor.
Meeting adjourned.
See if she has anything for good to do.
What are you doing tomorrow at 10?
Oh, coffee with the counselors. Yes. I said, eating breakfast, no, coffee with the counselors tomorrow at 10. Yes, here, I see, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I have, back to, 1088 South Hemlock. Well, actually, maybe not even about that, although I'll talk to you about that, but, on the special event permits, especially if food is involved, maybe talking with Ashley, if she hasn't already brought it up, about making sure that they, have authorization from the county health department.
Yes, so, we did have, in the conditions of approval, we did mention, you need to have a food card, things like that. Ashley and I worked with some language that, the county, state, and federal regulations that covers everything that we would need it to cover. So any future one that has any reference to food, we're gonna just slap that condition on. On that note, though, I'm glad you brought this up. Ashley and I did add, after we talked, yesterday, I guess it is only Tuesday, sorry, this was just yesterday. She does wanna bring this back to you guys in July, the special event process, because there's been a lot of things that have happened lately outside of that one, which we need to reevaluate our special event permit ordinance. Some of the way it's written, some of the things that it would allow and not necessarily allow, there's certain items that it's kind of, the language is kind of blurry. And so like the men's soccer league, we've been allowing it to happen, and we kind of allow it to happen, but we didn't think the language is like, oh, are we really supposed to allow that to happen? Which was never the intent to stop something like the men's soccer league. It was to control large events elsewhere. So Ashley asked if we would put it back on the agenda just to discuss it with you in light of so many things that have come up. So we are, I do have in the meantime, a paragraph from her. And we will be, doing some research and pulling some information together for her and be added to the July 1st meeting, because July is getting kind of full.
Okay.
So,
And what about, are we going to be able to add those, permit fees, building permit fees onto, for a discussion of some kind?
yeah, my apologies, I thought we covered it at the budget meeting, so I didn't have it on a future one, but I will add it. Do you want me to go ahead and add it on the July 1st meetings? Again, that one's a little bit lighter than the 8th, and so we can start the discussion as a work session item that day.
As a work session item?
But yeah, since it's a voting meeting, but we have a bunch of work session items on that meeting that we're not gonna be voting on, just because our work session is very getting full. So kind of figure it out.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, is Tim gonna be prepared by then to have some
I gotta get.
data about that? Is that too, I mean, it's 1 month away, but
Well, I probably won't have, or,
to talk building permit.
yeah, I probably won't have a recommendation, because I guess what I would, my proposal would be for, my proposal would be for a future rate structure. So that would be for, or my recommendation would be for a future rate structure. So I haven't done the analysis on the kind of the long-term expenditures yet. So if we could do the 8, I could probably get there.
And the effect of the city not having to,
So again, my recommendation for us would be, I think it's much harder, or it's much harder to do the holiday or refunds, right? And I'm not sure the juice is worth the squeeze on that. So what I would recommend is that you look at the fund and you take the current rate structure and you reduce the rates on a go-forward basis. And so what would it take
to fund the fund. Essentially, and how far could you drop it and how long could it run out? Is what my recommendation would be.
I'd like to see the statute or wherever it is that says that that money can only be spent for a building inspector or code enforcement officer.
Yeah, you know, I can send it to you, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to see it because, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty restrictive. I'm pretty sure that the builders had a pretty good
Your
lobby.
restrictive is not necessarily.
Yeah, it's like.
I understand, but I'm pretty sure the builders had a really good lobby.
I think
And-
part of that was that 267,000, if we could, if the city could forgive that permit. And retain those funds.
So in that case, right, for that case, what that essentially would do would put the money back into the bond. Cause all those funds were bond funds. So that would, you'd put that money back into the bond fund, I mean, you could do additional bond projects.
Or you could use it to help pay back.
Or you could use it to help pay back.
Right.
Is the, I feel like we vaguely went over this during the budget meeting, is the comment that once we pass June 30th, that any of those options are off the table?
I don't believe so. So in what, no, because essentially, you know, once I've closed the books and the audit's done, yeah, probably. But up until that point, so really up until December, no. If we decide that we're going to refund the city's portion of it, send it back into that fund. You know, I don't know what necessarily the policy standpoint is, so I'm, you know, I'm sure we could figure out some policy standpoint to make that happen. But yeah, because I would just say, you know, we've made the decision, this shouldn't have happened, you know, we go back.
Okay, so us having a discussion in July 8th or
I
it
don't
doesn't
think
fit
that
July 8th,
actually, I
or
don't think that,
it's not
I think
gonna.
that actually.
Yeah, good, that gives you some, gives all of us. some
Yeah,
context.
we were gonna kind of.
Well, and that's good, so it gave us a good piece of information, you don't actually lock your books down until the end of, until December.
Well, when the audit is done in December, they come in October, we can be done before that.
Okay,
I would say,
Okay, so October, so we
Yeah.
have until the end of September if we needed to.
I just say, yeah, we should, that should,
Before you-
that should not have happened. Sadly. I think we can make that happen.
And reducing building permit fees reduces the portion to affordable housing fund.
No, because those are two separate things, remember, so. Affordable Housing Fund currently has two funding sources, one is CEP funds.
Yes.
And one is the, actually, you know what, then we may want to take or have the discussion about refunding exempting the city from the fees next week meeting.
Okay. That packet will go up to Thursday, so we have a little bit more time if you wanna do that. And you have for staff report, hopefully.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes. We may wanna, I mean, we don't actually have to act on it until September, but to actually move the funds, but we may want to act on it.
Tim, I know we
Sorry.
can't change the excise tax that goes
Yeah,
to the.
correct, sorry.
but we could, instead of charging a certain permit fee, we could add another tax on. Taking that money that was for a permit fee and moving it into, using another avenue to move it into the affordable housing fund, couldn't we? I mean, is there anything that would stop us from saying, that the city has its own affordable housing fee, and we'd
Yeah,
lower the
actually,
permit
I
fee?
believe that is what I believe, well, that's what you could not charge an additional excise tax.
No, I don't want it to.
Right, I mean, I
No,
don't know if there's anything that exempts us from charging an affordable housing fee. I don't think you're gonna get enough money that you would be able to charge enough for that.
well, I mean, the
If you're gonna-
permit fee, in other words, replace a lot of, a great portion of the permit fee with this affordable housing, fee that we come up with, or I don't know how you.
Yeah, that would
I'd like
probably
to see-
actually.
I'd like to see that money
Or
go.
That'd be an Ash, that's probably more of an Ashley question.
Okay.
you could, if you could take that, build that fee. And get the homeowner to sign off on something saying that they'll only pay 10%. And 90% goes. to-
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think that's theirs, yeah.
Well, there's a way, I mean, it could be.
Yeah,
No, I'm,
I think for you, what you did in the budget process is probably your simplest, cleanest way in order to fund the affordable housing. And that's really just put money in it.
Just
Yeah.
thought it-
The other thing is that you have additional prepared food tax. That there's additional prepared food tax above and beyond what you pay the debt service. For that, you could use prepared food tax, that has, doesn't have a lot of ties to it. You could take the additional funding off of RV park. And you could transfer RV park funds in there if you really wanted to. Which could actually be a higher, better use for some of those funds, because you have like 1.7 million over there, so you can fund some extra, fund off some extra funds there.
rather than straight across the board, lowering permit fees, it would be cool if we could figure out a way to either lower or get rid of permit fees for people who are meeting the middle income workforce housing,
Sure.
in other
Oh,
words,
absolutely.
not just say, oh, no one has to pay
Mhm.
permit fees, but
Sure,
it would be another carrot to get people to, another incentive, in other
sure,
words,
absolutely.
as part of that package. That would be cool if we could do that,
Right. Now, that's probably more Steve's shop than my shop, but.
Right. But I also think that,
Yeah.
at least I was told that we might be having to hire,
Yeah,
eventually in the near future,
Yeah.
a new, building inspector. And possibly not, we won't get one from around here, we'd have to get someone from Portland, we'd have to pay for their, give them a lodging, stipend, all that kind of thing. If that's true, I'd like to see figures on what the top end of that might look like too.
yeah.
Cause that comes out of that fee, I don't wanna,
Yeah, when I would look long-term at it, again, conservative, you would have reserves in that fund, but there are sufficient funds in that fund to be able to do it for a long time. It's been making money for quite a while.
yeah.
Because it's basically been Alton, this is the first year that we put, the code enforcement into it. We're probably gonna put a little more Steve, a little more Tessa into it, because
Right.
truly, there's only 5%. There's only 5% of Steve in there, and, Steve spends more than 5%.
Right.
That's my supervising Alton.
And then we might even need another code.
Yeah, and that's another thing, but, there'd be some.
So we have to think of all those things, I mean, you can't just like say, oh, we don't.
So I probably won't have that part done, but I think I can get and let me work through the exemption of the city to get the funds out and the timing of that. If I have your guys' is okay. to do
Yeah.
that. Okay, so I will work on that part, because I probably actually need to talk to Ashley tomorrow. Let me work on that. Okay,
Start there.
all right, I will start there. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, anything else from anybody?